The GTO cave is a deep, dark, lonely and confusing place. When you're in the GTO cave, life is just a blur of B-34s, mixed strategies, and probably okay overbet bluffs. When you're in the GTO cave, you can justify almost anything by saying, Solver says it's only a small EV loss, or this might be a mix, or so we can take this line at some frequency. When you're in the GTO cave, you hate poker and you hate yourself. The other place you really don't want to be is the exploitative mist. When you're in the exploitative mist, you can just make up reads. You can say anything if it justifies your desires. If you don't want to bluff because bluffing feels uncomfortable, then you can say, they don't fold in this spot. If you don't want to call because calling and losing feels shameful, then you can say, so this small sizing is probably value heavy. If you want to be bad at poker, all you have to do is hang around in one of these two places. Want to know more? Keep watching. Played in an underground game last night, guys, and this was the lineup. It made it quite difficult to focus because lots of my opponents had mutated pig faces and were general abominable monstrosities. And this is of course an AI depiction. The AI has not learned how to depict people as normal human beings yet. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting there. This is my depiction of the GTO cave. The GTO cave is where students of mine often end up, and where I myself actually was several years ago, whereby I'd just done way too much study in solvers. I've sort of burrowed myself into the labyrinth of the theory of poker too much, and I'd lost touch with reality. I hadn't played enough volume, I hadn't been in flow state for too long. I'd lost a lot of my ability to sort of hand read and play exploitatively and know what's going on in the real world. So the GTO cave is a really big problem, but another big problem, an equally big problem that my students often have. This one isn't something I've suffered from since, like, I don't know, a very long time ago, but I coached the person the other day who came to me for coaching. They rocked up to lesson 1, and it was very clear to me that they were lost within the exploitative mist. The exploitative mist is, again, a place full of, like, zombies and mutants playing poker out in the wilderness. But what it really means to be in the exploitative mist is that you're trying to hand read, and you're trying to say what people are doing, what the tendencies are, and what you should therefore do. So you're like kind of mimicking the structure of a good poker thought process, only the things you say, the hand reading you do, the assumptions you're making are all total bullshit. They're just bogus. And here's a hand that illustrates the dangers of being in the exploitative mist that my student showed me the other day. So yesterday, just in fact, we worked on this together, and I asked my student, him to do some hand reading here. And I'll keep the student anonymous, of course, but we called a cutoff open with Queen 6 of diamonds. We go onto this flop of Deuce 3-4, all monotone. Not that bad a board for the cutoff, actually. You kind of want this board to be monotone because it negates how bad the rank is for your range, so that's not actually a terrible thing. But nevertheless, when a weaker player, this player started without a full stack, checks back here, you're going to see a very capped range. You're going to see way less flushes, way less overpairs than they should have. Many more combos of Queen Jack of spades and Jack 9 of diamonds, etc. as a proportion of range than what they should have. Basically, the range is too capped, too weak. It's overfolding to almost all aggression. The student here should, of course, just start leading. I think like a B75 is fine, but even something like a B33 here, 33% pot, is going to be better than checking. The student checked, though, on the 7 of diamonds turn instead of leading. I didn't mean lead the flop, sorry, I meant lead the turn. The student decides to check instead. The river is the king of clubs, and it goes check, check. Neither player deserves to win this hand. This hand is an absolute disgrace from both parties. And where did it go wrong? Like, why have we checked down? Basically, zero showdown value. Unbeknownst to us, we're winning here somehow by some freak anomaly. But how do we end up checking down zero showdown value in a very overfolded spot twice? We do it with bad hand reading, and when I asked the student to solve what was going on here, they said something to the effect of, well, on the flop, villain has a load of slow played flushes and overpairs with a club, so the fold equity is very low. See that, guys? Tunnel vision. That's the exploitative mist. That thought had been normalized because this student had thought like that in lots and lots of spots. Very often, a spot had come up where the student had a bluffing opportunity and he'd gone straight to the tunnel vision about what the best hands the opponent could have were and basically just used that as hand reading. What we have to do in this spot is actually work out what should be happening in theory, so work on your theory a little bit more. This is an antidote to the exploitative mist, is to get a coach or get some peers that are working on game theory and do a bit of work in a solver. try and figure out what the baseline parameters look like. Because when you understand how much slow playing should actually happen on this flop here, with this flop check, you'll see very clearly how underprotected ranges are on this turn, and what a large percentage of ranges are actually stuff like the Jack 10 off and things like that. So definitely here the right line is B75, bomb river for an overbet, clean up all the fold equity. Don't worry about whether you're over bluffing. That's the last thing you should care about. That is so pathetic and ridiculous to care about whether you're over bluffing in this spot. Of course you're over bluffing. You should be over bluffing. That's how you take the free money that's being offered to you. Stop burrowing yourself into the GTO cave. Stop saying, oh, I need X, Y, and Z hand to lead. You can actually lead that hand in theory. The thing is that students that don't lead this turn because they want to lead when they have a club, they're not even playing GTO correctly. That's nonsense. You don't even need a club to lead this situation. It's relatively good for your range. Okay, when you have a club like 10-9 off with the 10 of clubs, you'll bluff sometimes, but you don't need that. The GTO cave here is basically thinking that you need X, Y, and Z to bluff and not doing any true hand reading. Mistake. And exploitative mist is making up random arbitrary things about your opponent's range without doing the correct hand reading. Also a mistake. The longer you do these bad exploitative habits for, the more normalized they become in your game. They become ritualized and you start doing them all the time. Be wary about that. As we've just torn this poor anonymous student's play apart, it's only fair to look at a hand that I played absolutely abysmally. This is a hand where I once again fell prey to the age-old leak of going into the GTO cave. Just to remind you what that looks like, it's a pretty grim place. It's not a place you want to be. When you're in the GTO cave, you do things that are sometimes big blunders out of some bizarre pseudo-theoretical logic that you think is right because you remember like some blocker pattern, or you remember something that's like not even a big deal. Do you know how much blockers swing the EV of your hand, guys, in most spots? Not very much. There are some spots where they really matter, but for the most part, the impact a blocker has on your fold equity or whatever will be pretty small. This spot we're about to look at is actually one where, by trying to be a GTO nerd and by becoming completely blind to what was actually going on in reality, I regressed to a form of myself that was basically just shit at poker. So that's what happened. I got into this spot, making a bunch of content right now. I'll talk more about that later. For the Carrot Corner subscriber video library coming to you in September, one of the parts of that is a bankroll challenge that starts off at 100 NL, and I will give you more details about that later. But here we are playing that stake for one of those videos that I was recording, and what actually happened here was that we checked back the flop hijack versus big blind with the queen jack here. They then decided to pot the turn. This is already a grim spot. When a weaker player probes the turn, it's generally not something you have to be that terrified of, but when they pot it, it's a lot scarier. So this is a line that I think we're already indifferent in theory here. We could call or we could fold. We have a bluff catcher. We block a lot of bluffs with the jack of hearts. It's not particularly relevant. Whether we have queen jack or queen 8 or queen 6 here, the jack is going to be removing quite a lot of the bluff combos from villain's range on this node. So you could already fold here. I think calling is fine against an unknown weaker player for now. We'll see what transpires. But when they also go ahead and pot a kind of repulsive looking scare card river, that's clearly quite good for our range. What we're going to see here is just basically under bluffing going on. I think calling in this spot just doesn't work at all. To raise here, in theory, what you really need is 2 straight blockers. So you need to block Jack 10 really hard. This is common when your opponent has a strong value region and has made a polarizing action on the river. If you want to bluff them, you typically need to be interacting in a big way with their value region. So you need to have 2 straight blockers here, either pocket 10s or pocket jacks, in order to raise this river. Jack 10 would, of course, be the straight itself. With Queen Jack, we're in very pure fold territory. Calling in GTO here is losing. Raising is really losing. It's losing like 2.5 big blinds or something like that in EV. In reality, of course, raising is much, much worse. It's even worse, but I was like messing about here. My head wasn't really in the game, and it went back to 2016 Pete, and it was like, oh, you blocked a straight, and the queen doesn't block any bluffs, so you should raise. And I just like made a horrific blunder, a really, really bad play. That's bad in theory, but it's even worse in reality. Don't do this. Don't let the GTO cave control your actions. Think about your opponent's true range. It's way too strong. They've followed through for pot on a board that's bad for them, on the scare card river that's going to basically just shock and repulse a lot of weaker players. This is a horrible spot to do this in. This is garbage. I got what I deserved. I'll hang my head in shame. Okay, let's see if we can get over that. Feel free to tear me apart in the comments for that one. I totally deserve it. It just shows you that the GTO cave, even when you're mostly out of it, it can always suck you back in. Always hand read. Always think about your opponent's true range. Always think about your true EV. Onwards and upwards. Let's go. On to some happier hands now. This one is actually an example of why you should study game theory and how game theory can teach us how to make really cool plays. However, we should still always check in with the real world opponent's range and ask ourselves, do we still like this play in real life? Here with King 10 offsuit, we decide to peel the big blind, 2 or 3x open, assuming this villain is likely some kind of recreational because of that. The flop goes check check. Of course, we know the recreational player is going to be overfolding from this point onwards. When they check the flop, they're typically folding too much on the turn in the river. We know this from mass data. We know this from common sense poker psychology. We just know this. We go for an overbet on the turn, which is okay in GTO. It's even better in reality. This is a pure play. I don't even fancy checking here against the fist. I just want to take this spot. Get me the money. Fish decides to call, 3 of clubs on the river. Let's think about their range. They probably don't have any pocket queens, pocket nines, or deuces at high frequency. They might have the occasional slow play on the flop, but I think it's super rare. Sixes is something they could have, but I think they're actually going to go wrong and spew raise the turn with sixes. The reason that's really spewy is that my range is super polarized, and raising in position when someone is betting massive into you who has a really polarized range is just bad. So they shouldn't raise sixes on the turn. They shouldn't have threes, and 4-5, it's debatable whether that can A, open pre, or B, call the turn. So realistically here, their range is going to be capped at around Queen Jack, Queen 10, 9x, 6x, things of this nature, spade draw that miss. So here I just decided, well, do you know what? If I jam, I need about 78% fold equity, something like that to break even. I think I get about 90, guys. I think this play probably yields about 85 to 90% fold equity. It's going to be a really big money maker. We could bet other sizes too here. You could maybe convince me that for 2x pot, the elasticity, you know, the amount they contract their range is not that much different to this, and maybe it's better to go like 60 here instead of 89, instead of the full whack. But I just decided to go all in. It's a GTO play, but it's one I think is going to work even better in reality. Unblocking spades, blocking the best sort of Queen X combos. I don't even think that's good, actually. You probably want to block a 9 here, which we do. I think the 9 is going to call more than the Queen here in GTO because the 9 blocks our sets and the Queen doesn't, and they're both bluff catchers, but without getting lost in the GTO hole. See, I'm doing it again. I'm getting pulled into the GTO rabbit hole. All that matters is this play works more than it needs to. It's a good play. Let's move on. GTO helps us find this, but checking in with the real world does too. Do both. This play is kind of fun. Another spot where a study of theory will allow you to find bluffs where others don't find it. So we go for a 3-bet here with sixes because we're arrogant and we think we can beat the shit out of everyone, so we do this. Villain calls and we get a flop of King 5 deuce rainbow. We go for loads of small betting here. Villain's probably going to under raise overfold in this spot because everyone's terrified of king high boards and 3-bet pots. We all know this. We go for the small bet, they call, the turn is the jack of diamonds, and yeah, okay, amazing spot for our range. We can bluff really freely, and when we have an underpair, we definitely want to bluff a lot with a hand as low as sixes, and we definitely want to bluff with the 6 of diamonds because the 6 of diamonds is one of these cards that ensures that if a 6 comes on the river, we will make a set on a non-flush board. That's really cool because A, it allows us to not lose to a flush and get coolered and cry, but B, it also allows us to get called more often because there will not be 3 diamonds out there, so we can get called more often by things like King X and Jack X and stuff like that. So we go for a bet here. I think it's the best play. I think this will be overfolded by the river. The river is this horrible scare card that the opponent's going to hate most of the time. We have Queen 10. They don't. They have to jam the turn with Queen 10. We have a hand like Ace King. They don't. We have aces. They don't. We have a big nut advantage. We hit this river all the time. We probably have an equity advantage on this card as well, despite the fact we just barreled the turn. They have so many auto folds here, like King 10 suited, King Queen, even Ace Queen or something like that. It's going to be in a really grim spot here. Yeah, I think this is a really profitable theoretical shove. We go ahead and make it. In the real world, we do check in with the real opponent's range and we say, do we expect this to be like worse in the real world? Do we think they're stationing something? No, absolutely not. Think about this from the opponent's point of view. How are they going to feel here with most of their range? They're going to feel pretty grim. Even if you have a hand like King Jack here, I think you're going to feel fairly bad about life in this spot. So fold equity should be very reasonable. Go ahead, pull the trigger. Before you guys are like, oh, they'll never fold King Jack. Oh, they're never going to fold King Jack. Ah. Like, see, before you do that and you start crying in my comment section about that, do you see when they fold King Jack? Did they show you that? No? Well, guess what? My students fold King Jack here. I see it. Regs fold King Jack here. It happens. Get over it, guys. Just live with it. Next hand. This hand is an example of what happens when you play your A game, you're in flow state, and you get out of the exploitative mist, where you just say lazy, random exploitative things that are wrong. I'm going to show you what I almost did here, because in this hand, I very nearly fell into the exploitative mist and I had to catch myself because I wasn't paying enough attention. And also, this is a hand where GTO would be absurd. We don't really know the GTO about this spot. We could guess, but let's not even bother with the GTO baseline so much in a 3-bet pot like this one. So we 3-bet here, cut off against hijack, big blind peels. We go to the flop of ace jack 9 rainbow. It goes check and check and check. I'm basically checking for transparency here. This player is going to play extremely face up, having cold called and this being the board. So is this player. I'm going to find out when someone has something. It's going to be incredibly difficult for either opponent to balance their range properly here, protect their checking ranges, etc. Just a great spot to either bet really small or check for some free information and transparency. The fold equity we would get here would not be that useful. We'd fold out a bit of like pocket 8s, pocket 10s that has a couple of outs, but overall we're not getting useful fold equity by betting this flop. So we check. The turn is an 8, meaning that we have less of a thick value bet now. We basically lose to 8s now as well, which is a decent part of ranges here. I don't think we ever get 2 streets, so given that, again, I think it's better just to check for a bit of transparency. If this player pots the turn, I'll just simply fold. Like, if he wants to cold call a 3-bet and then pot turn or something into 2 people, we have a really obvious fold, so don't lead like half pot here, guys. Don't be sloppy and lazy and be like, I don't think they have an ace when they check flop. That's kind of bad hand reading in this climate. Like, they could definitely still have an ace here. I don't think they have like that strong of a range. I don't think there's going to be many nutted hands in this player's range when they choose to make this turn check, but when they decide not to lead with the weaker player in the pot, I think it will be pretty capped usually, but they will have some hands that, you know, still beat us here, like ace queen or ace 10 or whatever. This player can definitely still have stuff that they've either made on the turn or slow played sometimes on the flop, or maybe just something like ace queen, ace king that, you know, isn't going to fold here. So I don't think betting is really in order here. We check again. And then this happens, and I almost went into the exploitative mist here. Here's an example of how you go into the mist in this hand. If I was to say, overbets are strong and scary, so I fold, or this is under bluffed, I'm just making stuff up. Let's actually put ourselves inside the mind of this reg here. Ask yourselves, what are the chances that a reg decides not to bet the turn with something like a boat here? Like if this guy has jacks or 9s or queen 10 suited, what are the chances that he decides to check the turn after the recreational player has checked the second time? What are the chances? Very low? Yes, I agree. Like sub 20%, really low. So in this spot, how easy is it for this player to lose control and start over bluffing? Next question. That's right, it's super easy, because they can have king 10, king queen, 7, 6s, 5s, 4s, 3s. Did you catch that? 7, 6s, 5s, 4s, 3s, 5 by 6, 30 combos of underpair. Wow. Imagine he decided that an overbet was a cool idea with an underpair. Imagine he did. How badly would he be overbluffing? That's right, 9 to 1, 11 to 1, something like that. As soon as I started hand reading, as soon as I pulled myself out of the nonsensical, oh, they're not bluffing, they never bluff, exploitative mist that almost grabbed me, I was like, man, this is a fucking amazing call. This is such a clear call. And as I called here, I legitimately had the following thought. I have won. That was the thought I had. I made this call and I said, show me your like 5s or whatever. And he showed me 4s, and that was good enough. And we won a pot. So overall, guys, the message is simple. The GTO cave is this horrible monster that will suck you down to the depths of irrationality and will stop you engaging with your opponent's true range. It will rip you out of flow state. It will stop you playing A game. It will make you a timid, data-obsessed GTO nerd with a stupid squeaky voice that's not good at poker. It will do that to you. Yes, it's important to know theory. Don't get me wrong. Theory really matters, but only when you can extrapolate it in a way that helps you understand the game generally, so you can then lather your exploitative stuff on top of that bedrock of theory and have a good thought process. Theory on its own, being wielded by an amateur who's got an RNG and thinks they're playing a GTO strategy, is an absolute disaster. They're not playing a GTO strategy. They're missing out on the true development of their hand reading skills and their ability to play against humans. Big problem. However, if you don't have any theory yet, if you're a weak poker player, if you're fairly new to the game and you've just not studied formally, or you're not very good at it, or you're not very logical, you're going to make very bad attempts at exploitative play. You're going to make up shit like they never fold, they're never bluffing here, their range is all flushes. You're going to say nonsense, and you're going to play even worse than if you tried to play a pseudo GTO strategy. What is the way out of these two dilemmas? Study poker, learn how the game works, take a good course like the Carrot Poker School, work with a coach, work with peers who take poker seriously, understand how the game works, where are the parameters, where are the equity thresholds, what hands are raises and bluffs in certain spots, whose range is doing better in certain textures and why, what's the sizing scheme. All of this stuff is really important, only if you're willing to move away from it and play exploitatively. The cave is a bad place to be. The mist is an even worse place to be, arguably. You want to be the hell away from both of those places. I hope this video has helped you. If you've liked it, leave a comment. Let me know that you like the format. I'll be more likely to repeat videos that get good feedback. Press the like button, leave a comment, and share it with people. This is a trap that we could all do with avoiding. See you next time. And don't forget to check out carrotcorner.com for all of our paid content. Bye for now, guys.